And now we are going to invite our mayors to the stage, and also our managing editor, Jim Gardner, who is going to moderate a conversation with the mayors. And first we're going to hear from each of them. They're going to tell us a little bit about their priorities and their outlook and the visions for their cities. And Jim Gardner has prepared a number of questions after that. And we'll also ask if any of you would like to send up some questions for Jim to ask the mayors. There are some little index cards at your tables, so just throughout the presentations, if you write your question out and just hold your hand up high, we'll circulate through and grab those. So just make sure we can see you, and we'll bring them up to Jim. Okay, and just something about Jim Gardner, our managing editor. One thing to know is that he writes the editorials that appear every week in our newspaper, and we get a lot of kudos for his work on that. So we're pretty proud of him in that level. He does a lot of things at the Business Times, but that's the one you can count on him for every single week. So since San Francisco is the host city, Mayor Lee is gracious enough to allow Mayor Kwan to go first. So to introduce Mayor Kwan, I'd like to please welcome Zach Wasserman, and he's partner at Wendell, Rosen, Black & Dean. So welcome, Zach, and also welcome Mayor Kwan.
Good morning, all. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the partners and lawyers at Wendell Rosen. We are in historic times. 34 years ago, I was privileged to help with the election and the administration of the first African-American mayor of Oakland, Lionel Wilson. We continue to make history because today I'm honored to introduce the first Asian American woman as mayor of Oakland, the first Asian mayor of Oakland, and the first Asian American woman elected as mayor of any major city in the United States. She and Ed Lee, the first Asian American mayor of San Francisco, make a rare and great pair. Their selection and election indicates progress. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. Our mayor, Jean Kwan, is a woman of many firsts. She was the first Asian American woman elected to the Oakland School Board and the first to the Oakland City Council. But always first for Jean are the people that she serves. A 32-year Oakland resident, she has dedicated her life to making government work for people. Her experience and inspiration came from the civil and human rights struggles of the 1960s, as did Ed Lee's, my own, and a fair number of people in this room. Personal history is important. Jean's history, her determination, and her ability to deal with the challenges of a complex global world give us a lot of hope for the major struggles facing our city. Jean's soft-spoken manner, her low-budget, get-out-the-vote campaign style, her work ethic, her focus and her ability to connect with everyday citizens, plus her amazing energy, truly amazing, she is everywhere and always on, are what will enable her to lead Oakland to solving the almost but not quite overwhelming economic, social, and planning issues that we face. I do give you one warning about our mayor. Telling Jean Kwan that she cannot do something just makes her work harder to prove you wrong. Before she speaks, and I actually bring her to the podium, we're going to hear a very short clip that presents a side of Oakland that you may not be aware of.
I think what makes Pandora special is something called the Music Genome Project. We have a team of 50 musicians that have worked for us for almost 10 years now. They actually listen to songs one by one and analyze each song along close to 400 musical attributes by hand. That connective tissue is how we power Pandora. So on the one hand, Pandora is a technology company, very sort of cutting edge in terms of utilizing the web and mobile products and so on, but the underlying technology itself is hand-built by humans. In this economy, to sustain ourselves, it's pretty straightforward. We have to focus a lot of our effort and energy on the monetization part of Pandora, so how we make money, which is advertising. We have a compelling advertising site that draws users in and causes them to click through and do all the things that advertisers want. And we've also invested heavily in our advertising sales team. So we've actually, in the last few months, hired quite a few people, both direct sales and people who support the sales team, to help push that forward. You feel like in Oakland a real connection to the community. It's very diverse, it's very human, very interactive, a friendly place with a rich musical history. A good portion of our employees live in and around Oakland. A lot of people get here by public transportation, that walk and bike and so on. So it's a kind of a logical place for us to be, and I think we'll be here for many, many years to come.
It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce you to our new energy-amazing, energy-efficient, and trailblazing Mayor of Oakland, Jean Quan.
Good morning. The reason I wanted to show the Pandora clip, I think at the last Business Times event, the founders of Pandora were even more specific. They basically said that should they try to move their company out of Oakland, they'd face a major rebellion on behalf of their employees. And one of my themes of my administration has been to ask the nation, even to ask Oaklanders, to take a fresh look at the city. Oakland is clearly recently named by Forbes magazine one of the I think it's the fifth coolest city in the country, and they're not talking about us being a green city. So I actually like that one the most. When we deal with this Friday, we're going to have Art Murmur. You're going to see 2,000 or 3,000 mostly young people on the streets of downtown Oakland, going to art galleries, listening to music, eating grilled cheese sandwiches from our outdoor night market restaurant strip on 23rd. It's an interesting, amazing place. It's not the Oakland that you may see in the news or the Oakland that you may remember from your childhood. I met a lot of ex-Oaklanders this morning as we were waiting for the breakfast to start. Oakland is the second most literate city. It is the nation's city with the best weather. Sorry, San Francisco. The best weather, and I have to say, I think we're constantly being named as the most diverse city. And last I counted, that's like 129 languages spoken in our public schools. Our latest group, Bhutanese refugees, the winner of our spelling contest, is a young lady from Nepal. So Oakland is a city that's constantly reinventing itself, whether it was being the end of the Transcontinental Railroad that brought dozens and hundreds of different kinds of European immigrants across the country, or the home to the Pullman Porters that gave birth to a jazz movement that linked cultures from urban cities across the country, or today as the most affordable place for new immigrants who are coming to the Bay Area to live. Each of them leave a mark and a unique gumbo of my city. And so one thing that I would say when you come to Oakland is that Oaklanders are pretty passionate about our city. Sometimes we have a little rivalry with our big sister, San Francisco. I was teasing Ed that he and I have probably made more public appearances together than my husband and I have in the last couple of months. And I can assure you that we work really closely together. We've just solved a couple of major long-standing issues. And we've both been part of the fight to save redevelopment. And what we may not have in height with the last two mayors, we certainly have in fight, and have a tradition of fighting together. So these events are traditional bragging events, so I'm just going to go through a couple of the things that are happening in Oakland that you might not have paid attention to, but I'm going to end with asking you to invest in Oakland in a different way. Yes, I do want your dollars, and we don't have payroll tax, and I'm also giving business tax breaks to downtown investors. But let me go through a couple of stats, and then I'm going to talk about the real investment that I'm helping to personally lead in Oakland. It's no secret that Oakland is the port city in the Bay Area, and the Chinese often talk about the Bay Area, by the way. I don't know if San Jose is represented, but as the Golden Triangle, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. So we're integrally linked, and the three mayors are working closer and closer together. But our port is pretty much back to pre-recession levels. in terms of imports, exports. That's good news for all of us. The Oakland port is really beginning to situate in a couple of unique areas. We're one of the few American ports that exports almost as much as we import, and that the growing link between Midwest and Valley agricultural products into a more affluent Asia are a critical part of our exports. Oakland's niche is also that we're sort of the home of organic and foodie trends. So, I had a Neiman steak in Taos, New Mexico about a year ago, which is our organic meat producer based in Oakland. It represents some of the changing American habits. And in Chinese, it's very interesting. I have some relatives in China. They're so worried about pollution and herbicides that you've got this growing market for California organic foods. So that's pretty amazing to see people in Shanghai and Beijing starting to eat organic foods from California. So these specialty markets are particularly important. We are the central location. Jerry Brown used to tease, and I used to joke all the time, that people who live along BART in Oakland can get to downtown San Francisco faster than most of San Francisco. So it's still true. And I take BART across all the time when I have to come here for regional meetings. The port is hosting, particularly because in the global world, I would bet you that Ed Lee and I were on more national papers in China than we were in the U.S. I got my first congratulations. The announcement was made about my race around, I think, 9 o'clock at night, and I got my first email within an hour from a cousin of mine who lives in Shanghai, is doing business there now. So it is a global economy. They pay attention. On April 15th, the port and I will be hosting a conference for the region to talk about how we can improve our import-export markets, and this is, I think, a critical part of Oakland's future. Oakland, like I know this, the PowerPoint talked about all the new hospitals being built in San Francisco. In Oakland, too, there's going to be about $2 billion of expansions and modernization at Kaiser, Alta Bates Summit, Children's Hospital, and Alameda County Medical Center, where my husband sits on the board. We are also finally taking over, we're catching up on retail in our area. It's no secret that Oakland's been underserved, and there are a lot of complicated reasons for that, but I got to cut the ribbon of the Target yesterday, and we're going to be giving special developmental incentives for retail development along the Broadway corridor to try to return some of the regional retail back to Oakland that we historically have had. I understand the Whole Foods in Oakland is one of the most profitable in their chain. And even the little quiet Sears in terms of appliance sales is one of the most profitable nationally for the Sears company. So there's an underserved need in Oakland, and it's a good time to come in. Again, we have incentives. We have I'm told, the 11th best retail market on the East Bay in the nation, and it is extremely underserved. When I did my 220 house parties, almost every woman in Oakland told me that they needed more shopping. So that's a powerful source of funds. We're also becoming really the cultural and entertainment center of the East Bay. I have friends, I don't know about you, who are moving out of places in the suburbs and the valleys because they want to age in place in a city with great transportation. I'm the chair of the Chabot Space and Science Center, and our new Bill Nye Global Warming exhibit, I promised Alex I'd give that a plug, is a national model for teacher education, and the Oakland, California Museum of Arts has just been renovated, and again, sorry, Ed, our zoo is rated the best zoo in Northern California. So we have amazing opportunities, and if the A's project with Major League Baseball in Victory Court takes place, it will bring 2 million visitors to downtown Oakland and to Jack London Square, and with the renovations around the lake, will probably make it a premier entertainment area. And as I said, I'm going to be at City Hall Friday night. If any of you want to join me for First Friday, it's a traditional date with my husband and I. We walk the restaurants and the art galleries on the First Friday with thousands of other Oaklanders every month. So what I'm saying basically is Oakland is ready for business. I think we're well positioned. I told the Business Times lunch in Oakland a couple of months ago that we're going to be restructuring our CETA department to put more emphasis in economic development. Now, of course, Ed and I have to win the redevelopment fight. It's going to be very tough. We're all going to be making some interesting legal maneuvers to protect our assets. Oakland's got a couple $100 million in redevelopment assets poised for investment as affordable housing and developments come forward, maybe a stadium, but basically good investments in our downtown and regional infrastructure. I'm planning to appoint, I'm almost there, a major economic ombudsperson in the mayor's office. We are ready to give both, and this, I'm actually pretty serious on this, to give pretty aggressive business tax phase-ins to major companies and even small companies coming into Oakland. We're looking at ranges from 2 to 5 years of phasing in our business taxes. We are doing very well with stimulus grants. We expect to see major green industries and grants to get going right now. Right now, in the 100 blocks of downtown Oakland, business and building owners can get up to 90% of their energy retrofits paid for by a very competitive grant that we won nationally. We will have a concierge service. So if you own property in those 100 blocks of downtown, we will take someone with the forms to you, fill out those forms, and find you an architect and a construction company if you want. We have about 2 years to make downtown Oakland the greenest downtown in the country, and we plan to do it. Clearly, Oakland, again, I get it was a San Francisco real estate firm. Oakland's become the home to major new green companies like BrightSource, Solar Millennium, Sorona Fuels, and we have all the new cool industries. So I showed Pandora on purpose because they are now leading a cluster of about half a dozen smaller software companies that you may not know yet, but the Pandora, I don't know about you, but Pandora is on my iPhone. It's on 15 million other iPhones across the country. And we're developing a cultural climate of business over there that I think you can see a lot more younger and newer software people get into. So I'm going to end here. Those are the sort of bragging rights that we always do at this program. But I do want to say a couple of other things about Oakland. All of you may know that I led a lot of the urban coalitions in education when I was a school board member. I chaired the Council of Urban Boards, the 100 largest school districts of the country. So no other mayor, I think, in the country cares as much about schools as I do. I'm leading personally a campaign, and there's a little card at each of your tables talking about a different kind of investment that I would like to see in Oakland by major Bay Area companies, whether you're based there or not yet. We are asking our companies in a city where unemployment, particularly for African American youth, is 28%. 28%. You know, that's twice the national average. And where nearly, right now, Tony Smith will tell you, among African American young men, that only about 30% of them are graduating from high school. That's not acceptable in Oakland, much less in America. And we can do something about that. So I'm asking businesses to do 3 or 4 things. I want you to adopt one of our 100 schools. I want you to consider sending employees as mentors to what I call Oakland's toughest kids, the kids that arrest every year, the kids who are getting out of foster care, and the kids who are chronically truant. I'm asking you to look at giving an externship to an Oakland public school teacher, and that's basically a concept that I helped pioneer when I was a school board member. Take a teacher who's been out of the workforce for a long time, bring them in to shadow your employees for a month during the summer, so that when they go back, they can have real-world experience and know what kind of jobs they're preparing their young people for. And of course, give a young person an internship. Oakland statistics and across the country have shown again and again, if you give a young person an opportunity to shadow somebody, that their possibilities, and particularly if you give them an internship, they're more likely to graduate from high school, they're more likely to go on to college, and that's the kind of experience we want. And so I'm going to end with the story, since Oakland is the 8th I think the city with the number 8 city with the most women entrepreneurs. I have the story about the very famous pre-engineering academy at Oakland Tech. It sends more kids to MIT than any other high school in the East Bay, and that includes Piedmont and out in the suburbs. Also sends more kids to Harvard, by the way, than any other high school in the East Bay. They have a very famous pre-engineering program. And for many years, I was worried that there were no women and very few African American Latinos. A lot of Asian men and a lot of white men, but not a lot of women and not a lot of African Americans and Latinos. So one year, when I was showing the Secretary of Education the program, I noticed that there was a cluster of girls and of African Americans in the corner. And I felt really good because I put a lot of energy into recruiting kids up from middle school and preparing them and getting them to take more math. And I was the chair of the Chabot Science Center and worked on science teachers. And so I went up to the girls and I asked them, I said, so how did you get interested in engineering? And this was 2 Vietnamese girls, 4 African American girls from West Oakland. And they said to me, oh, well, we, in 6th grade, did a shadowing day at PG&E. I said, so were you inspired by a woman engineer or by a minority engineer? And one of the girls looked at me and she said, no, he was a pretty boring white guy, but we figured if he could do it, we could do it. So my point is, some kids don't get the opportunity that our kids get. There are still about 40% of the kids in Oakland who don't have internet, and I don't know about you, but I can't imagine a kid today without the internet at home, constantly, everywhere, and on Wi-Fi. So we still have that digital gap. You can help me close that gap. You can help me close what is still the last struggle of civil rights in this country. The opportunity to have a good public education. As the daughter of an illiterate immigrant woman, even though our family was here for over 100 years, because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is another story, and something that both Ed and I have fought against the remnants of discrimination against Chinese Americans. But I can tell you that growing up in a state where education was free and was well-funded, and at a time when universities got more money than prisons, that I, as the daughter of an illiterate immigrant, widowed mom, could go to Berkeley and become the mayor of a great city. Every child should have that promise. So this is our opportunity. This is what makes America different. This is what makes Oakland particularly pretty energetic, wave after wave of immigrants, and each leaving their touch on the city. This is something that we can do as a Bay Area community. And whether you had roots in Oakland, whether you don't live in Oakland, this is something that you can help me do. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you can stay up. Thank you.
It's like, hey.
I know. I thought he was going to come up and sit here with you. Anyway, thank you so much, Mayor Kwan. That was just wonderful. And I have to say, anybody in San Francisco who hasn't recently taken a look at what's going on in Oakland, I encourage you, go have dinner at Pecan Restaurant and go to the Fox Theater and just really see the vibrant things that are happening there. It's a wonderful thing. I always think there should be a bus tour, but it's really just a wonderful thing. So we thank you. And to introduce Mayor Lee, And by the way, Mayor Lee and Mayor Kwan have known each other and been friends for about 30 years, so I think that's just a wonderful thing. To introduce Mayor Lee, please welcome Dan Angel, President and CEO of Golden Gate University. And don't forget to send up your question cards. Dan Angel.
Good morning, and welcome from Golden Gate University, who are very proud of our 110 years of being part of the San Francisco heartbeat and DNA. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce a very new mayor of San Francisco. As a matter of fact, he is the 43rd mayor, Ed Lee. It's been a pleasure to see how quickly Mayor Lee has tackled his key priorities and brought civility to the political dynamics of San Francisco. Formerly the city administrator, Mayor Lee was appointed unanimously as successor mayor by the Board of Supervisors in January to fill the remaining year term of former Mayor Gavin Newsom. He is the first Asian American mayor in San Francisco history, and I want to congratulate the Asian American duo that we have this morning. Mayor Lee's depth of experience in city leadership and management has prepared him well for this job. In 2010, he was appointed to a second term as city administrator by Mayor Newsom and unanimously confirmed by the Board of Supervisors. In that role, he has spearheaded government efficiency measures and reforms that reduce the size and cost of government. He's implemented the city's move to cleaner vehicles and an infrastructure to support electric vehicles and green city government. He has also implemented and oversaw the implementation of the city's first ever 10-year capital plan to guide capital priorities and infrastructure investment. Mayor Lee first began working for the city and county of San Francisco in 1989 as the investigator for the city's first whistleblower ordinance, and after that served in several key positions, including the Executive Director of Human Rights Commission, the Director of City Purchasing, and Director of the Department of Public Works, prior to being appointed to City Administrator in 2005. At this time, we're going to show a short video clip, and then we'll introduce the mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce and welcome the Mayor of San Francisco, a.k.a. the Velvet Hammer, Ed Lee.
Good morning. Thank you very much to Business Times for inviting me here. Thank you, Dan, for that kind introduction. And Mary Huss, just thank you very much for inviting me here today. This is a wonderful occasion. I also want to welcome Mayor Jean Kwan, my very good friend, to San Francisco. And I'm thrilled to be with her today and to share this event together. I also want to acknowledge David Chu, who's here, our board president, Malia Cohen and Mark Farrell, some of the other supervisors who are here. Welcome them here today because one of the tenets that I have in helping run the city is to do it as teamwork. And I've enjoyed this special relationship with the Board of Supervisors. I hope it continues throughout the whole year. But we've got a lot of tough decisions to make, but we're communicating very, very well. I heard the introduction for my good friend Jean Kwan, and I think someone said she was soft-spoken. I don't think so. I think Jean, I've known her for many, many years, as you may have read about, and we both worked very closely together in Oakland in those early days. But I do want to continue congratulating her because we are working very closely, along with Mayor Chuck Reed. We have a fantastic Bay Area, and you will no longer see, at least during my term, where we're separated. There's a lot of things that we can do together to build the whole Bay Area. So I'm very excited about that. I've been excited, actually, for 7 weeks. Everywhere I go, everybody's been asking what I've been doing and how I've been feeling. And I must say that it began with a bang. I mean, right during my inauguration, Jean Quan comes up and says, "You want to go to the White House?" And of course, we're off to, in my 7th day on the job, to the very first state dinner, meeting with President Obama and President Hu Jintao. That was fantastic. But while we were there, both of us, along with many other mayors, did what we were supposed to do and what we could do. And that is, we met with everyone we could about the business of our cities. And in particular, with San Francisco, I got to meet my very good friend, Commerce Secretary Gary Locke, who I grew up together in Seattle, Washington, and plugged him for China SF and for all the money they could possibly give us. And we're already working on that, and he immediately said that China SF, that was one of the most innovative programs to ever come out of the West Coast. And we're here today celebrating that as well. I got to meet HUD Secretary Sean Donovan, and in that very short time with all the other mayors, was able to talk about our SF Hope, our Hope SF, our building of housing and affordable housing, and the great partnership that we will have together as he unrolls and has unrolled the federal homeless program, and how that can match up with our own End Homeless program as well. We met with Secretary Hilda Solis and talked about job and job creation, and discovered that we're both working together on linking up our community colleges to our school districts and make sure that all of the students not only go to college, but continue and get those degrees so that they don't drop out at the rates that they have been. And of course, meeting with the other mayors throughout the country, comparing notes, getting to meet mayors such as Daley in Chicago and learning what he's done all those years, and some of the new mayors, from Kevin Johnson to others throughout the country, what they're trying to do, and comparing notes of what we could do here in San Francisco. While at the state dinner, got some business done. Not only meeting some great people across the world attending that dinner, but also being able to thank the President of the United States for the investment that they're giving, the immediate investment of $200 out of $490 million for our Central Subway. And along with Lieutenant Governor, as the President came over here last week upon our invitation to come back to San Francisco, he was here on the tarmac awaiting his visit to Silicon Valley. And in that very short 5 minutes, not only thanking him for his support in the budget, but also extending offers to take the money that Florida doesn't want to have, and Wisconsin and other places, for our high-speed rail. If they don't want that money, California can use the high-speed rail money. So that was a very open dialogue. Well, that's a long way of saying that I've been very busy. I've got priorities. I've been sharing those with many members of our great city. Certainly, I've got a budget, a $380 million budget to balance, as do many mayors share in that burden. But we will do that, we will do it right, and we will do it the way to keep our city solvent. I've got pension. Pension reform has got to be done because that's leaking our general fund. And we will be spending a great amount of time with our labor leaders and our businesses and City Hall and the Board of Supervisors. My job is to get everybody working together in one direction and not multiple ballots on our electorate. And then, of course, you've seen the America's Cup. AC 34 is what we start talking about it in City Hall. And the excitement being generated here is actually true. If you've been paying attention, just 2 days ago, you saw a little barge come into the Bay Area. And that barge was carrying the trimaran. It's so tall that when you see it constructed, the mast of that boat will exceed what the length of, or the height of the Golden Gate Bridge. So it will not go under the Golden Gate Bridge. It's so tall. But it will become the symbol for the next year of the excitement that AC34 will bring to this Bay Area. $1.4 billion of economic investment, just under 9,000 jobs, 700 in construction, hundreds and hundreds of businesses will be produced on that event. And it's an event that represents how this city becomes and always has been successful. That's part of my whole budget play. We've got to have a safe city, we've got to have a solvent city, and we've got to still have a city that is successful. And that represents a great success that we have. And today, as an update, we're going through and beginning the CEQA process. By the end of this year, we should have, working with our port and working with the Event Authority and all the other agencies dealing with transportation and people movement, AC34 will have a great foundation in beginning its work to host this fantastic worldwide international event. And we are working with the natural talent that San Francisco and the Bay Area has. We have one of the most natural amphitheaters, whether you're talking about the hills around Coit Tower, viewing the boat race, Golden Gate Bridge, or the marina and Chrissy Field, all of them will be in play as this event comes forth. And it's not an event that occurs only in that short month in fall of 2013. The individual races leading up to the final races will go on for a whole year, spanning the year beginning in 2012 at the end, all through 2013. Already, other countries are trying to find out how they can schedule their practice sessions in the Bay Area. So you'll see that excitement going on. Jobs. Of course, I've been working on jobs. All of those projects that I talked about earlier is an indication to you that jobs and the commitment to make sure that our business climate is the top priority. And I agree with Gene. I want you to do the same things here. But I can't really ask you to do it if I haven't done my part as the mayor to make sure you are here and you are growing as businesses. Then I can ask you for those extra things. So my job is to make sure that businesses are here, they're growing, and we have a strong economic climate. Last year, as you can see, Zynga signed a new lease for 278,000 square feet. Salesforce, an unprecedented buy of some 14 acres in Mission Bay. And of course, they would not have done it without the invaluable contribution that our redevelopment had in building the infrastructure all through that Mission Bay. That's why I spent all of Friday last week up in Sacramento, arguing with governor's staff, but making sure two things could happen. If they're not listening to the mayors of this great state, they better listen to the senator and to the congresswoman who fought very hard for the projects that we have, whether it's Treasure Island, Hunters Point, the Candlestick, the Slage Lock site, Mid-Market. All of those represent the underpinnings of a great redevelopment agency tool that we've used with the incremental tax power that they've had. We are host in San Francisco to some 500 technology companies, 74 biotech and life science companies, and some 200 clean tech and green tech companies and businesses. Just in the past 3 months, Bayer Healthcare and Nectar Therapeutics opened up their headquarters here. In the clean tech world, San Francisco is home to the 5 top solar companies in the world are located here, have offices here. And just the other day, in celebrating with China SF here in San Francisco, we celebrated the fact that some 13 companies now from China are located their offices here. And within that, five of them are the top world's solar companies. In addition to that, we celebrated even the small companies, the smaller ones, like GCL Solar. Just the other day announced they're moving from their office and tripling their office space into 1 Market Street. In the span of less than 2 years, a solar company tripling their office space here in San Francisco, that's got to tell you something. And not only their investment, but the business climate is changing. And Twitter. Yes, of course, within the very first weeks of going on the job, we heard about Twitter. And thanks to David Chu, who's here today, and his counsel and his guidance, we immediately, along with Supervisor Jane Kim, all met the top 3 officers of Twitter. I went down to the offices down on 4th and Folsom, not only met with them, but we also met with the very engineers in closed-door discussions and talked to them about their commitment, their desire to want to be here, and the reason why they want to be here, the excitement for them every day to exchange the incredible talent that they have with other companies, and to be able to do that in settings within their offices, and to have enough of those offices in San Francisco to allow them to stay. And then for them to tell me, by the way, 65% of their current workforce are San Francisco residents. 25% of them ride to work on their bikes every single day. And by the way, Mr. Lee, we love those little green dedicated lanes. Can you do more of them? So that was the input from those engineers. So yes, we put together our heads, and we felt as mayor and as key members of the Board of Supervisors that we could offer as an anchor to the mid-market area a exemption to our payroll taxes. And by the way, I think, along with some other members of the board, that the time has come that maybe that payroll tax is something that we ought to rethink completely to welcome businesses in more. Start working on that. That's how big Twitter is. It's no longer just 4th and Folsom. They have their international area. You've obviously been reading about them. Their tools are being used throughout the whole world now, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Libya, whether it's Yemen. The Twitter tool is being used throughout the whole world. And that's, I think, the force of being here in San Francisco. So it's critical that companies like Twitter be convinced that they can stay here, that we are welcome, we are welcoming them. It's also critical to us to change that whole mid-market and make sure that we don't allow that to become isolated again. So our city is a city of innovation. You all know that entrepreneurs from all over the world are coming here from Silicon Valley. They're risk takers. They're coming here to build their businesses, to build new ideas, to surround themselves with other great new ideas, and to forge a new San Francisco employment workforce. We're home to companies, as said earlier, that change the way we communicate, like Twitter. We're also home to companies that change the way we work, like Salesforce and their cloud computing. We're home to companies that changed the way we listen, like Dolby Laboratories. And now, more and more, we are becoming home to the way we play, the online game industry. And I want to announce today, a little surprise to you, but it should be consistent with everything else that we're doing, that as hosting more and more of these online game creators and engineers in this city, I want to announce one of the most exciting online gaming companies called Kabam. We'll be opening up a 25,000 square foot office here in downtown San Francisco as we speak. Thank you and welcome Kabam, and let the games begin. I just met the owners and the management team of Kabam this morning. They've been here since 2006. They're growing from 25 employees to over 250, and they chose San Francisco to be their home. That is very exciting. So, whether it's these businesses that we have, whatever it is that we're doing here in San Francisco to make ourselves successful, my tenure here is going to be about great communications, a unified city, one that unites all of us to make sure that we can be an engine of job creation. Because everywhere I go, whether it's the Bayview, which I'll be visiting this afternoon, or the Mission, or Chinatown, or the rest of the city, it's all about making sure that we create jobs and we sustain those jobs and make sure people have a future here. I had the privilege of finding a home here in the early 90s. And as my wife and I went through months of trepidation around the cost of that home, that needed 3-bedroom home, our kids were jumping up and down the bed saying, "We're going to Disneyland, we're going to Disneyland." And that's how they viewed San Francisco. San Francisco continues to be, in my mind, an exciting place for everybody to come. And it is no less than Oakland and San Jose areas, a city of great diversity, a welcoming city, an international city. And I want to continue making sure that we've done everything we can to make sure that businesses here, that you help us do all the things that we want to do, and that we do our part, and that we have an honest discussion with everybody here what we need to do to move forward. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. And what a pleasure to have such a unifying voice of reason here. Now I'd like to invite Jim Gardner, our managing editor, up to moderate the Q&A portion of the program. Jim Gardner, welcome. And again, if you have questions, hold them up and we'll bring them up on the cards and we'll bring them up to Jim. Welcome, Jim Gardner.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, mayors. I have to say, having been involved in moderating this event for a good few years, we saw an example from the first thing this morning of the working relationship that both mayors referred to. In previous years, there were definitely two camps at the breakfast table. There'd be the Oakland camp and the San Francisco camp, and sometimes they acknowledged each other with a quick cursory nod, and sometimes, if they were in a really good mood, even a handshake. These two mayors sat down immediately beside each other and caught up with each other for all of breakfast, so that was nice to see. Now, I'm sure both of you are familiar with the famous Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times." And it's fair to say that you have both taken office in what qualifies as those kind of interesting times. There are challenges, huge ones, that face both of your cities, and I'd like to talk with you about some of them today, beginning with one that both of you have referred to, and that's economic development and job creation, which is a key concern for our region as a whole. Mayor Kwan, as the guest city this year, we'll start with you. Under Oakland Mayor Jerry Brown, Oakland had a strong track record of attracting businesses in from elsewhere. The economy has not been very favorable to that recently. What do you plan to do to re-energize and recharge Oakland's business attraction efforts and renew Oakland's image as a good place to do business?
Well, you know, okay, this does work. You know that the core of Governor Brown's plan was to revitalize downtown, and he had this famous 10K goal, and I think he got to about 6,000 if you included the permitted projects that are still now waiting for the economy to come up. And I think that was critical for revitalizing downtown. It then helped kick off what's considered by the New York Times the hottest restaurant scene now in the Bay Area. It has helped with the renovation of the Fox Theater, and many of you know the Paramount from the Symphony already. So I think that was the cluster, and that I think will also have secondary benefits. I think we're now at the level where national retailers are again looking at downtown Oakland. So retail is probably the biggest structural deficit. San Francisco, as the #1 retail city in the Bay Area, steals from all of us. I'm trying to bring some of that retail back to the East Bay. We think that will be critical. But Oakland's also made an amazing investment in the future of blue collar and industrial jobs. And so you will see that we cleaned up our zoning. I think for a while everybody thought that you could build a 90-story condo on the waterfront. We clearly have zoned industrial areas as industrial areas. We have, together with the Port of Oakland, come up with a common plan for the port's future. Something that's hard for politicians because we're not going to see the immediate benefits probably for another decade or two, but will be good for Oakland, will be good for the regional economy. So that long-term investment. And then thirdly, both San Francisco and Oakland have benefited a lot from the stimulus dollars. Those projects have been hard to get off the ground, but the airport connector, the major renovation of the Port of Oakland, the green energy grants for downtown Oakland, et cetera, are probably going to bring in hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs immediately in the next couple of years.
Okay. So how much of your redevelopment strategy is going to rest on luring companies from elsewhere in the Bay Area? I think you've recently highlighted the fact that you're, quote, cheaper and more interesting than San Francisco. And how much is going to rely on nurturing the homegrown businesses in Oakland, though maybe homegrown is not the best choice of words?
Well, you're referring to our pod industry.
Yes, I was.
That's actually gets a lot of great publicity, but is probably only worth a couple $1 million in sales taxes. So that's not a major thing. The reason we put in those rules, quite frankly, is to control it. I think at a point, every cafe in downtown Oakland thought it was a marijuana pharmaceutical dispensary, and that was really difficult for development. And so by taxing and regulating it down to 4 dispensaries actually became the model that most of the state has followed. I actually helped write that legislation because if medical marijuana is legal, there should be a legal place to buy it, and it should be taxed. And so I think we're one of the first cities to tax those dispensaries. I think it's the same thing in terms of growing. If you're going to have legal marijuana and legal dispensaries, then they have to be able to buy it legally from somewhere. And so we've got Fortune 500 companies who want to potentially get involved in the growing of medical marijuana in Oakland. But that's probably a very small part of our economic development. I'm guessing that our port and the niches that we have in organic foods and food production and even our new software cluster are going to create many more jobs.
Mayor Lee, you referred in your remarks this morning to the Twitter deal, which seems to be very close to coming to fruition. Obviously, the tax breaks are a major part of that. Going forward, do you see tax breaks as San Francisco's economic development tool of choice, or was this a unique deal done in unique circumstances?
Thank you. I think certainly it began as a unique one because we've been struggling with how to activate mid-market for many, many years. I mean, I think all of you who've been in working in San Francisco know that's probably the closest thing to what our Skid Row is for quite some time. And so the struggle with mid-market, and in talking with Supervisor Kim and David Chu, we felt that was the appropriate tool because we had tried everything else in that district. So it's a tool that we believe will be successful. It's certainly Twitter management, even though their board of directors would want to save as much money as they can because there are other costs of being in San Francisco. They told us that was critical to them is the city's ability to help them. And so we use that as an example, but it isn't just for Twitter. I think Twitter asked for more that we couldn't give. However, I think when we compromised on the 6 years of exemption, we felt that was the right thing to do for the creation of that corridor. Now, having said that too, Twitter, because of the way they do business, because of the technology world in of itself, they will attract other businesses that will come to mid-market. And that's what we're hoping for. So we've invited them to be an anchor. We know there will be other businesses because when you walk into their offices and you know how they operate, and the engineers informed us of this, they operate in clusters. You hardly ever see an employee working alone in these tech companies. They're always in clusters of 3, 4, or 5. They're interchanging their ideas. The applications companies are there with them. In fact, even in their current site, they have a whole floor of other companies that are working with them as well. So we think that this will be the way to do mid-market. Whether it's the appropriate tool for others, I think we'll have to see on a case-by-case basis.
Now, you mentioned this morning the possibility of supporting a replacement of the payroll tax. Would that be a replacement with a gross receipts tax, or do you have something in mind? I know that proposal has been circulated in political circles in San Francisco?
I think with the opportunity to discuss more openly with the board, David Chu is helping to lead the effort to actually have a very good discussion about it and to start dialoguing around what might be more fair for other companies, because we do have a lot of loopholes that we haven't been able to pay attention to. So we're just beginning that dialogue, but I think the timing of the dialogue is such that there's a much more open air about it among our members of the board and among the business community to talk with us. So we're going to be inviting a lot of people to come in and give us their opinions about what can be done that's more fair, more equitable, still allows us to have a certain amount of revenue. At the same time, it invites and supports the growth of business in San Francisco.
Okay. You both referred this morning to now Governor Brown's proposal to eliminate redevelopment agencies, which is obviously an alarming fact for many of our cities. Mayor Lee, you had talked about some compromise ideas a few weeks ago on this on redevelopment. Any sign that those are getting traction, or is a compromise of any sort possible?
Well, 8 of the 10 mayors that visited the governor about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had at least succeeded in opening a door and dialoguing with their staff and beginning a whole process that has culminated in some 3 very intense weeks of interchange of information. And I have to say this, the governor's office is still very committed to making sure that they get the money that they need, and they still view, which we have a difference of opinion, I think all the mayors view that they can't possibly get what they need out of eliminating redevelopment. They might get half of what they think that they can get. So we have a very deep difference of opinion about that to share with the governor. At the same time, we recognize what he's trying to do, both in the realignment as well as trying to get funds to fill the $25 billion gap the state has. Having said that, we have gotten support from Senator Feinstein, Congressman Pelosi, and Senator Boxer, and Jackie Speer to actually help the governor understand the impact that eliminating redevelopment agencies have throughout the state, and particularly in San Francisco, where there's been such a huge historical commitment of federal funds, whether it's cleaning up the Hunters Point, Candlestick area, or cleaning up the former naval bases at Treasure Island. So having imparted that knowledge, the strategy was to offer a way in which we could help raise the money that the governor may need to plug the budget gap. At the same time, perform and be a leader in reforming the bad actors throughout the state. There are redevelopment agencies that have not performed, and we don't want any part of their bad business, whether it's in Bell, California, or any other place, that we're willing to reform and lead it. It just so happens that our redevelopment agencies in the Bay Area are the best performing agencies throughout the whole state. And finally, to maybe help create the revenue stream that the governor wants to see, which is to our school districts. He's felt for a long time that the diversion of monies to redevelopment could have gone to schools, and he's cutting schools, and so we want to create that revenue stream. So all 3, we have proposed ideas of how to cover that. Having made that presentation and having spent the day in Sacramento, we're not sure at this point whether our proposals will be accepted or whether there are other proposals that will modify the governor's elimination to make sure that our projects are stable and continue to be the attraction that it's been. We reminded the governor with no uncertain terms. He's got to come down and have a game at the AT&T Park, because as soon as he comes in and sees what we've done in Mission Bay historically, you cannot dismiss what redevelopment has done in that Mission Bay. Some 10 to 12 years ago was literally a rail yard. Today, it is hundreds and hundreds of housing. It's a brand new village of small businesses, restaurants, and technology and biotech companies coming in. We don't want to lose that tool, so we've got to have something, if it's not redevelopment, something powerful enough to allow us to bring and be an incentive to private investment, because we can't build the infrastructure on ourselves. We've got to use tax increment dollars in some creative way to build the infrastructure.
Mayor Kwan,
I'd just like to add just a little to that. I think Governor Brown knows, because of downtown Oakland, after the Loma Prieta earthquake, it was pretty devastated. There are so many buildings and so many empty lots because of the damage right in the core of our downtown. If he had not had redevelopment dollars, he would not be at his 6K at this point, and we wouldn't have renovated the building where his now very well-known art school is, the Fox Theater, which is sort of the symbol of the Renaissance of Uptown. So I think it's unfortunate that the people in Sacramento feel that they have to pit the K-12 problem, which is a huge problem. As a former school board member, there's no one who in my city government who would not like to get the schools more money. But I think that they have to not pit it against the potential of giving young people economic development and jobs. When I was walking block by block, literally in East Oakland, so many young people came up to me, and other than a safe place to be after school, jobs was their #1 issue. Will there be jobs for us? Can I get a job in the city of Oakland? And redevelopment plays a critical part of that. And so it's unfortunate that one's getting pit against the other. It's unfortunate, as I said, in California, Jerry on the stump speech used to say that when he was campaigning for governor the first time, the California prison system was only 3% of the budget. Now it's nearly 11% of the budget, more than we spend on our universities. And so pension reform in the prisons and costs and how we handle our criminal justice system's got to be part of the solution too. Taking away an economic development too, and particularly the way they're counting the dollars. Ed's right. The 8 mayors signed a letter saying basically we are much closer to this when you actually look at the debt that you would have to pay back if you take over our agencies and hand them to the county school boards in some cases, that you're probably $1 billion short. And that there is not as much money as they think is there, and they have to look at it. What I worry about is that because of Prop 22, we will be in lawsuits, and that property, assets, money that we need for economic development are going to be tied up in court for years. That's the nightmare scenario. And in addition to that, they're forgetting the what I call the multiplier effect, because it's not just the amount of money we put into the buildings and the infrastructure, it's the number of jobs. How much more will we pay for unemployment? How much more will we pay in crime because we have higher unemployment? Those are the factors that you have to look as a whole in the state to move us forward completely as an economy.
Do you have a backup plan for moving some of these, I think you mentioned $200 million in redevelopment projects forward, if the governor is successful in eliminating these agencies and taking the money?
You know, we're all doing these pretty silly things. You're going to see tomorrow a special session of the city council where I'm selling property back and forth between the redevelopment and the city to protect it, basically. A lot of the cities are doing it. San Diego did it. The legislature is going to try to find some way to get around that. We're going to be set up in courts for a long time. I'm worried because I'm actually pretty cash rich, so a lot of that selling is going to be back to the city. And so I have to protect both money as well as properties in the Army base. I have the same problem. Senator Feinstein's letter could have applied to the Army base. They've spent millions of dollars cleaning up the Army base, getting it ready for logistics and for the port. And under this scenario, the whole redevelopment area could go to some strange land bank not controlled by the city.
You both referred in your introductions, it was also mentioned that both of you have made history as Chinese American mayors, first ones of a major U.S. city. What doors does that open, and what opportunities does that represent for each of your cities? Mayor Kwan, you...
Well, I mentioned earlier, we started China SF a couple of years ago, and that was something I really thanked Mayor Gavin Newsom for, and Michael Cohen and others when they started it, because they had a vision that the future was with a great company, a great country like China. And as Mayor Kwan has said earlier, our pictures are literally all over the country of China, and they know that the Bay Area is now home to historic both appointment and election in mayors. And so there's a really great excitement going on, excitement that I think will end up increasing very short time, maybe even double the number of companies that want to come over and feel very comfortable that the San Francisco and the Bay Area are places where they can create offices and be a connection to the rest of the country, if not the rest of this part of the hemisphere. And we are already starting dialogue. In fact, when I was at the China SF Lunar New Year celebration, I was approached by one of these companies that are here from China, and they're doing high-speed rail. And for decades, they've learned from all the technology from Germany and Japan. They want to actually be partners and help California build high-speed rail. And could you kind of vision in there? Because 100 years ago, the Chinese were helping to build the railroads in the Bay Area. Now the Chinese companies want to help us build a high-speed rail in the state of California. That would be a great business irony for us to celebrate. But it's that connection. It's that historical movement that we're making. And that's what I actually thanked President Obama for inviting us to the state dinner, because it gave us the stage upon which we could promote our localities. And I think it's going to work. I think that these companies really want a connection to the United States, and they want to feel very comfortable, and the Bay Area is that very comfort level they can find. And I think you're going to see a lot of Chinese companies going back and forth, and then we can also promote U.S. companies going to China to help do their developments as well. That's going to be door openings both ways.
Oakland's going to do two major things this year. So on April 15th, we're hosting this mega region conference to help businesses that want to do business with China in particular, and for all of Northern California. So we're inviting mayors from the entire region, particularly those in agriculture and those who have other products, such as, I think out of the Port of Oakland, recycling is a huge part, scrap metal, foods, automobiles or vehicles, interestingly enough, and medical and technology products are major exports, and they like red wine, by the way. So we're in big competition with Argentina. And so I see Oakland particularly as the port city playing an important role of organizing the region and even maybe the country. What was interesting when we were at the Conference of Mayors, all of these small town Ohio mayors came up to me and said, the Chinese just opened a factory. They love to buy tangible things. They still like to make things. They had opened up these factories of 200, 300, 400 employees in Ohio. They're buying up factories that American capitalism has left behind, modernizing them, reopening them, and giving jobs. And it was interesting. 3 black mayors came up to me from 3 cities in Ohio and said, what tips can you give to me? And actually, so with the League of Cities and the Conference of Mayors, we're talking about doing that on a national basis too. I think that, trust me, put the Pimsleur Mandarin tapes back on my iPod to practice my Mandarin. We probably every week now welcome 1 or 2 delegations from China. I'm trying to personally be part of those welcomes. We're welcoming a group of major Chinese investors. China has 4 major banks that do investments internationally. We're welcoming a group of them, I think, next week. I think that Ed and I and the region can play a really important role in making the investment, as if they need any help, if they can get into Ohio. I'm not sure what help they can get from us, but they like to come by, they like to talk, and so I think you're going to see us both doing a lot more trips to China and doing a lot more internet. I'm probably doing a Skype interview every other week with a Chinese paper, and we have to develop sort of a global outreach and a PR, I think, for the Bay Area.
If I'm smiling, John, it's because in some of those discussions, we literally were giving some valuable tips. Some of the mayors were saying, well, is it polite to hug? I mean, I want to love my brother. and we said, no, you don't do that. You can shake the hand and you can bow a little bit, but you don't hug. It's just that kind of tips that allow mayors to be more successful. And they actually wanted to see whether or not we're organizing a Bay Area trip that they can be hopping on.
Mayor Lee, you referred to the huge potential and economic boom that could accompany the America's Cup. Most of the attention and buzz has certainly been on your side of the bay. What I'm wondering is there a role in the America's Cup for Oakland?
Well, of course.
I intended that for Mayor Kwan, but you can jump in there if you want.
I was actually going to hit him up on that later when I submitted it. However,
you're not going to steal that boat that's out there on the barge. You're not going to take that.
Well, because we have the deeper bay, we want to be a part of Fleet Week. We understand the Admiral's ship can't dock in San Francisco, so we'd like them to come over to Oakland. I think that there's a lot of regional cultural activities that the two cities are so linked together. Literally, I'm like 7 minutes from San Francisco City Hall when I step on BART. We are really a regional economy, and both restaurant trends go back and forth, music trends historically have gone back and forth, and I think that you're going to see, particularly if we try to host international events, that we actually need the resources of probably all three cities to host the largest international. We've tried to get the World Soccer Cup here in the Bay Area, and I think we're going to try again.
Mayor Lee, we got a question from the audience here that we'll take the opportunity to put you on the spot. You've gotten very good reviews for your first 2 months of office in building consensus and making civility cool again in San Francisco City Hall, if only for now. Is there any chance or any scenario you can see in which you would reconsider your decision to not be a candidate and would throw your hat into the ring?
No, thank you. No, I am focused on doing what I can this year. I felt that one of the things that, as you know, having worked in the city of San Francisco for some 21, 22 years, a part of my success is being able to deliver on promises. That we don't need a whole lot of legislation to, if somebody says they're going to do something, get it done and follow up. I want business to do that. I want them to feel that they can talk to supervisors and the supervisors can talk to the mayor. And when we make these promises, we keep them. And I kind of made a promise that I wouldn't run. And what I want to do this year is reestablish that trust that I think I came to San Francisco originally to live and to be part of. And that as people are good for their word, government's good for their word. We have a government that is helping all of us, not hindering, not being overly bureaucratic. And so that to me is more of a personal answer to that question. It would take an awful lot for me to change that because I did make that promise. And I think part of my success is not being a politician. I think what the city has needed was really to start fulfilling the promises that we've made for many years and not make new ones. And so that's what I want to be able to do.
I think that's about as close to a flat no as we're going to get. In the short term,
he's very diplomatic, and on top of that, when reporters asked me, I said, I'm not sure if he could afford the pay cut to become mayor, and whether his family would put up with that. Ed's a man of integrity, so I think you're going to have to find another mayor.
In the short time we've got remaining this morning, there are a couple more issues that I definitely wanted to make sure we touched on. One is pensions. The problems with both cities' public pension funds. Mayor Kwan, if anything, Oakland's problem seems the more urgent in that you've got a very large payment due in a few months that relates really to previous pension liabilities that had gotten kicked down the road quite a long time ago. How are you going to deal with this big payment?
Well, you know, what they're talking about is the police retirement fund that was founded in the 50s, and apparently it ran out of money within the decade, and they tried to fix it in the late 50s, they tried to fix it in the 70s. Now I've got a $43 million payment coming down the road in 2 years. I'm going to recommend a compromise that we bond out on some of the excess equity we have now, and then also start paying it down. I tried to get the council to pay it down when I was chair of the finance committee 4 years ago when times were good. I was not able to get the votes to do it then. So I'm recommending a combination. We're in the middle of the worst recession in our lifetime, so just paying it all off is not acceptable. It would be 43 plus my current $46 million million deficit that I'm looking at. So there's no way you can make a $90 million cut this year to just pay. And we've actually did the long-term studies that's actually cheaper for the city to bond off and make some annual payments than it would be to just start paying it off each year. So it's good for the long term, it's good for the short term. I think in Oakland, though, we have a more serious problem just because our police officers don't give anything to their pension. As you know, at least in Oakland, an average Oakland police officer makes $100,000 a year, can retire at age 50 with nearly 95% of that. And so that's not sustainable. I've been saying that for a long time and got duly beaten up for saying that versus an opponent who said, oh no, we wouldn't have to make layoffs, we can cover it. It's not sustainable. So in San Francisco, I think the police officers pay 9%. In our city, they pay nothing, not a penny. So I'm in negotiations with the police department now, with the OPOA. And we believe that in this next round of bargaining, that probably all employees will have to go to all the unions will have to go to some two-tier because of the pensions that were given earlier in last decade are just not sustainable. But on the other hand, I'm not into all the pension bashing. The pensions will actually only be a small part of the structural changes that we'll have to make. Some of the bigger changes, I think, and you don't have this problem because you're both a city and county. The city and the county and the school districts, I think, are going to have to merge some facilities and co-locate some of our efforts and try not to duplicate efforts. And it's something that we've been pioneering. I have been holding joint cabinets with the school district. We are actually going to share some facilities. We're going to share some staff. And we're going to relocate some current staff to make the city safer. In a few weeks, we're going to make a pledge to open up rec centers, libraries, and high school gyms in some of the toughest neighborhoods till 10 or midnight in parts of East Oakland where we have the highest rates of crime and violence.
Mayor Lee, you've been involved in the conversations with business leaders, civic leaders, labor leaders about how San Francisco is going to wrestle its own pensions problem down. Looking at those talks, how likely is it that, particularly on the labor side, that enough changes are going to be agreed to make a real difference in the problem?
I am extremely optimistic and still, because the group are working together, all the labor leaders have come together. We will have differences of opinion, I grant you that. However, I think they know how serious the problem is, and we've impressed upon them to, literally, we've broken down our current budget challenge, and a good third of it is over $100 million of debt service that we have to deal with, that are employer contributions, rising healthcare costs. So we're at a very critical point where everybody realizes the conversation has to happen now with a commitment to do structural reforms in the system. And if we don't do this this year, we're going down a very slippery slope on our solvency as a city because it's affecting us right now. Now, it may not be at the numbers that Oakland has, but they are real numbers when you're talking the $100 million extra that we pay this year. That's money that could be going to health services and to social services that we all want to maintain in the city, public safety as well. So the groups are still working very closely. We are going through, we're right now going through proposals that are going to be vetted through our controllers, actuary, analysts. We want to make sure that the numbers that we talk about saving are true numbers. And then we'll allow the public to start looking at this probably next month as we begin the public discussion around what these proposals are. My job and my goal is to make sure that the city family keeps as much together as possible. Ultimately, I have to get something on the ballot with the majority of the supervisors that will make sure that our pension system is solvent. And that's the responsible thing to do. And it's one that I find, being a non-politician, the timing is perfect. Because I did the 10-year capital plan for the city. That's why I opened the 16th library out of 24 last Saturday. We can continue to build the beautiful things we are, continue to be a great city, but we've got to take care of business and put discipline into the pension system that we already have. And it's because we haven't paid attention or done that financial planning that many cities haven't done. And look where the other cities are at today. We're not the only ones on this. And so that's another reality that the other labor leaders are realizing. So I think we've got at least a good fighting chance to get everybody in the city family together.
Okay. Now, the first year that I moderated our conversation with the mayors, I think it was 2003. And at that time, it was Mayor Jerry Brown sitting in the Oakland seat and new Mayor Gavin Newsom sitting in the San Francisco seat. And some of the questions related to new stadiums for the A's and the 49ers and what the heck is taking so long. Well, we're 8 years down the road, and in one respect, not a lot has changed. We still don't have the stadiums. One thing that has changed is both of the teams have said, we're through, we're moving out. And I think this is the point at which Ann Landers used to advise the lovelorn to wake up and smell the coffee. Obviously, you feel differently, and I'd like you to briefly tell us what are your grounds for optimism that these teams can be kept in our part of the Bay Area and that new stadiums can be built for them. Mayor Kwan, do you want to go first?
Well, part of my secret is the fact that the Giants are doing so well. I don't think they're going to give up their territory in San Jose. We are talking, that's all I can say. The Victory Court site is probably one of the best sites for a large movement of people anywhere left in the Bay Area. You have a ferry, you have the Samtrans tracks, you have 2 BART stations, 2 freeway entrances, and a lot of existing parking already because of the Laney College side and the other area there. So we in the city owns over half of the land. So it is ready to go, pretty gorgeous, very similar to what San Francisco has been able to do with Pac Bell, I think, and it's a very comparable situation. It would bring at least $2 million 2 million visitors to downtown Oakland and Jack London, which is exactly what those areas need. They have 2 major projects ready to go that have been gotten through the Planning Commission, the Oak to Ninth project, and the Jack London expansion. The Lake Merritt area has almost finished its major capital fund improvements, so you can walk from the new stadium to Lake Merritt in about 10 minutes. It will be pretty gorgeous as an area as a whole. You can walk to the Oakland Museum, you can walk to Chinatown from the new stadium. It will be an amazing location. So I'm optimistic on that, and I would guess that we're both competing for the new 49ers stadium, but that seems to be moving a lot slower because of the 49ers interest, I guess, in that place down south. So we're mostly, I think, looking at taking the Coliseum area, at least in Oakland, and making it much more, not just the Coliseum area, but a retail, hotel extension of the airport, and being right on 880, much more of a destination in of itself for multiple uses and not just for the stadiums.
For San Francisco, as all of you know, we've enjoyed our World Series champion Giants in so many ways. And Larry Baer and the team have been in the office a couple times already, and we're talking about the Seawall Lot 337 right behind AT&T Park and how they are planning to develop that. And that's going to be additional developments that will invite more investments.
Could we see the 49ers in Oakland and the Warriors in San Francisco?
Don't think so.
Very visionary. Very visionary. So we have a very good relationship and a lot of discussion going on with our Giants owners, managers, and it should be it. I mean, much media talks about stadiums, and stadiums is one part, but I think all of you know it's really just a structure. What we really have to have are business relationships, good, solid business relationships that respect what they are doing and what we as a city are doing. And that's what we're establishing with the Giants to help them be successful as a business in addition to a great sports team. I've taken the same philosophy in meeting with Jed York. And yes, I have brought him into the office. We've had a good discussion, and we're talking about my 49ers, our 49ers. And he lives in the city, so do I. And we began by saying, personally, what are we all trying to do here? You've got that thing in that other county. That's good. That was something that you thought could happen. But now there are economic realities coming to bear. And what I want to do is make sure that the York family feels very welcome in San Francisco. They are part of our history, part of our colors, if you will, when you're talking about sports. And I think he felt it. He felt that there was no politics involved. It is something that has a history of being in our city, and we want to talk to him about business opportunities that we can do together.